Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Wanted to thank all of you for coming here and joining this session today, which is focused on recruiting and increasing access and opportunity within STEM for young people. So my name is Lindsay Malcolm-Piku. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Assessment at Caltech. And I'm going to introduce my fellow panelists. So first we have Natasha Berry, who is the Vice President, Global Inclusive Culture, Diversity, and Equity at Smith & Nephew. We have Mary Moreland, the Executive Vice President for Human Resources at Abbott, and Neela Rajendra, Chief Inclusion Officer, NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So I wanted to start off just with a little bit of framing for the discussion. One of the things so I am what I call kind of like a expat planetary scientist. I have my degrees in planetary science, but I am not currently practicing that. And one of the reasons for that were kind of tied to a lot of my experiences as I pursued my education. And to back it up a little bit, both of my parents are scientists. They went to school in the segregated South in the 1950s and 60s. And the space race is really what inspired them to pursue science. And so they went and they pursued their degrees. They were both working scientists, practicing that field, and because of that, I had all of the opportunity and advantages of having my learning within STEM being supported in the home and in school, being exposed to STEM. I used to tell people, you know, on Easter, we would go to church in the morning and the Air and Space Museum in the afternoon. So it really was kind of not programmed into me, but just kind of presented as an option for me. But we know that despite kind of, you know, that story that is common for a lot of people, they kind of start off with a really strong interest in STEM. We don't necessarily see that same diversity in our workforce. And so what we want to talk about today is how we can approach that challenge of ensuring that we're developing and retaining a diverse STEM workforce. And that really starts with our youth and ensuring that there is exposure to the kind of possibilities that are out there, but also providing the support necessary to achieve those possibilities. So I'm going to start off with a question for everyone. It's a big picture question, and I wanted to know, what do you consider to be the most pressing issue or biggest misconception when it comes to the STEM workforce?
Mary, you want to take that? Sure, I'll start. So Abbott is a healthcare technology company. We operate in about 160 countries around the world, and we know how important it is to have our scientists and our engineers and our technologists focused on the world's most pressing healthcare problems. And when you think about the diversity of that workforce, 160 countries, or you look at the diversity in this room, it might be easy to say, we don't need to worry about the diversity of our workforce any longer, that maybe that work has been done. But yet, while a lot of good work has been done, we know that's not the case. We know there's a lot more work to do. In the US, half the workforce is female, but barely a quarter of the STEM workforce is female. If we look at Black and Hispanic adults, very rare for them to be in a STEM field. It's much more common to be in a non-STEM field, which means there's underrepresentation in the STEM fields. And so at Abbott, we're very focused on that as an issue, making sure that we get that diversity of thought, because we know that makes our products better, we know that makes us better as a company. The way that we're focusing on it is starting very young, actually with a high school internship program, and then followed by a STEM internship program for college students. That's helping us to build the healthcare workforce of tomorrow that will have that diversity of thought that we will need for the future.
So at Smith & Nephew, we really believe that it's from the classroom to the operating room, right? We really believe in supporting children from elementary age. We have a very robust SWE. I don't know if there are any SWE participants in here. So SWE, NSBE. So the partnerships that we have, we take those to the classroom. We partner with elementary schools, we partner with middle schools, we partner with a high school in Memphis called the Memphis Academy of Science and Engineering, and we have a long-standing partnership with them for them to continue with their STEM goal and focus, where they actually take classes on our manufacturing site. They get to partner with our product managers and see the product and hands-on experience while they're in high school. And then once they leave, we continue, right? We want them to continue to matriculate and eventually end up with us in some way, shape, or fashion, from internship to then entry-level programs, and then come on. So we really do foster that belief. And it's amazing to see, whether it's our partnership with Junior Achievement, for them to see our products for middle schoolers, or elementary school, for them to see representation. We want them to see female engineers. We want them to see engineers of color, that it is possible, you can do it. The other part for us is explaining to them the variety in STEM. Right? It's not just, oh, you can be an engineer, but no, you can work for NASA, you can work at a university, you can work in a lab, you can be an MD. So really introducing them, and particularly in MedTech, the variety of opportunities, how you can use your STEM education in MedTech. So from the classroom to the operating room.
It's really hard to follow these two amazing women, but I'm going to try. So at NASA JPL, we're really focused on inclusion at the core of our work, because we have seen tremendous efforts at bringing in and recruiting folks from all walks of life, all different kinds of backgrounds, all different kinds of identities, but retaining them and having them thrive in a culture that has traditionally been incredibly cutthroat, incredibly sink or swim. That find the flaw is the core of the culture at JPL, because they see themselves as doing the impossible, and that means that you need to be as harsh as you possibly can be. Well, that's easy to do if you feel psychologically safe and feel like you belong in that environment. But if you don't look like the other people in the room, and you have difficulty maybe voicing your opinion or challenging an idea, you're not going to want to stay. That's not going to be an environment that's going to feel welcoming or where you feel like you belong. And so while we are focusing efforts on ensuring that we have a diverse pipeline, I am very much focused on ensuring that the culture that we're bringing diversity into is going to support them for success.
So we talked about, coming off of Neela's comment, thriving instead of just surviving. How do you thrive in the workforce?
Yeah.
Right? And part of that is a huge piece of not only seeing others like yourself thriving, but feeling that sense of community, that sense of belonging. When you talk about the big picture, we bring in about 40+% women. By the time you get to leadership, that number drops to the 30s. And that's women who are white. It's in less than 10 for women of color. So what are we doing to help that delta?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
what are we doing
exactly.
about, and that is my goal, that is my drive. What do I need to put in place so you thrive and I can close that gap?
And so often we're talking to women who I'm hearing anecdotally, I don't want to say yes to that particular senior technical position because I'm making it work with my current workload and my current family responsibilities. If I take that next step, I don't know if I'm going to be successful and what I'm going to have to sacrifice by doing so.
We hear that a lot, and actually our Women Leaders at Abbott network group has really tackled that as one of their core areas of focus, helping women understand that that's true. There's more responsibility, but you also get a bit more autonomy And we've really pushed that message throughout the organization. Our finance organization, for example, was struggling with that a few years ago. And now of our 5 businesses, 4 of the 5 have female controllers, whereas 5 years ago, there were no female controllers. So we've really put our efforts around helping people understand that as you move up the ladder, yes, there's more responsibility, but there are also ways to have more support and more autonomy, and frankly, the leadership is fun.
I think I said no to this job. Like, I was like, I'm an HR business partner. What? Why do you want me to do this job? And when I went home and I sat down and I thought about what I do in my personal life and how much I give back personally in this space and the support I give to youths and people of color and, in this space, I thought, wow, I could really leverage. I've always been such a strong proponent in the Women's Network. I'm like the first one in there volunteering, or the Black Professional Network, or, all the different areas that I feel, disability and pride, I feel super supportive in. I've always been such a champion. But I still was like, I'm a business, I'm a business partner, and you're asking me to step out the box and go focus on something about changing people and culture and lives. Can I just go over here and do like the org design and hire talent and things like that? So we know there are those moments when the opportunities present themselves and they overwhelm you. How is this going to affect mommy land and partner land and all of those things, and you do grapple with it. But I tell you, 2 years in, it's been probably the most personally transformational job I've had.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think what you all have shared really reflects a change in how we think about someone who's within the STEM workforce. If Google existed back in the 1980s, if you had Googled, a scientist, you probably would have gotten a picture of kind of like, the old white guy in a lab coat with frizzy hair looking kind of disheveled. But now just kind of hearing about all of the ways that STEM is embedded in your jobs and, how you are trying to kind of bring all these elements of what it means to be in the workforce, what it means to be a person with a life, and in a STEM field, it shows that has changed. Are there any other trends in the STEM workforce or in terms of the STEM pipeline that you wanted to point out or speak about a little bit?
I don't think that was my question. But
Okay. Okay. Was that mine?
That was for everyone.
Oh, it was for everyone. Okay. So, Natasha, you mentioned that 40% of your workforce is women. I think we've also seen an uptick in the entry-level positions for women, which is great. I really want to applaud the work of universities like Caltech and Harvey Mudd, who have made concerted efforts to diversify their schools, which help us as organizations who are recruiting from those schools. I think also, after the murder of George Floyd and the social unrest that came, I think a lot of companies started really trying to build partnerships with HBCUs, those that did not have existing partnerships. JPL was one of them. And, finding meaningful relationships with those schools that are mutually collaborative and mutually beneficial is still a challenge, I'm going to be honest, because I think for us as an organization, making those relationships, building trust when budgets dip and priorities change, sustaining those relationships, even though we don't have, senior leaders who are alma maters at that school, it becomes challenging. So I think finding those research collaborations to sustain, for us at least, is certainly something that we need to be doing more of to develop the STEM pipeline. I think also it gets back to the fact that representation matters. So if we are going into schools and people see that kids see themselves in us, they can be inspired. They're much more willing to be able to see the possibility that this could be a career for them. And so I really see it as, as an FFRDC, a federally funded research and development center, one of our moral obligations to the nation is to inspire the next generation of children, not just for JPL, but for our country.
So STEM is hard. I think that's kind of one of the mottos out. It's a hard area. When I was in undergrad, so I'm a hardcore Seminole, so Florida State undergrad, Florida State and Florida A&M, the HBCU neighbor, our fellow neighbor, they shared an engineering school. They still share an engineering school, actually, to this day. So, if I was ever in that vicinity, I would often see. So I wasn't in STEM, but if I had classes maybe in that area by the engineering school, I would see plenty of me, but I realized they were actually all from FAM. I just didn't know that they were. But that was a great partnership, and it was an intentional partnership. What I worry about, again, is my delta. Like, I am like an analytic, like the junkie in me is like the number person, is I want you to get support early so you can continue on your STEM track. So how can I make sure that you as a student, even when it's hard, even when it's challenging, that wherever you are, that support is there for you, that universities ensure that you can thrive as a student? How can you then get employed? How can you see the vision that continuing on this path is going to get me, I'm going to get a career out of this. I'm going to have gainful employment, get off my parents' payroll, which is what we all want. I worked in a career center, right? So how can I help you go there? And then when you're in, what development opportunities do I have in place for you to see the variety of careers that you can excel to, that you can continue to move up the ladder, that I can close that gap, that there are possibilities that are there for you? Otherwise, we will see less people, less women, less people of color going into STEM and feeling like you can have a successful career. So for me, it's that constant drive of when you come in, where's the mentorship, where's the sponsorship, how can I help you navigate, if you do want to change, why, and what can we do? So I'm just conscious of us staying grounded to keeping our women and keeping them in this type of field, because we need you. I know we're going to get to that question about later, but it's going there. That 8-track, now it's like you hit, I know, you're like, 8-track, what's that? That CD is now like 2 seconds and you get music. That's how everything is going. That's where it's going now. So if I don't have people in STEM helping us, making sure those things happen, we're going to be in trouble. We need people who are going to be creative and innovative and stay on that path, or we're really going to feel it.
I'm going to take it in a little different direction. So when I think about trends, right, then you can open any newspaper and you'll see a story about hybrid work, remote work, best way to work, best thing ever, right? Almost to the point of like, if you go into an office now, it's like, you aren't trying that hard to find a different job. This summer, I talked with our interns about their experience. And as I realized as I was talking with them, and have small groups with them, like 5 people, I realized as I was seeing them, they were all in the office. And so I started asking them, so tell me about your experience, what's going on? It looks like you're all in the office. And these are all people, some of you I think are probably around that age too, whose schooling was really disrupted during COVID. And they started talking to me about how they really didn't want to work remote in the summer. They wanted to get to know their coworkers. They felt like they were learning more. They love that a lot of our internships are in our manufacturing facilities. They get to walk the floor. They get to see the machines. It's super cool. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember as an employer, right? Because it's easy to drink the Kool-Aid that, everyone wants a remote job. And this really resonated with with us as a company, because we never shut down during the pandemic. We kept going, and we kept our manufacturing facilities stayed open. Our scientists kept doing all of their research, creating COVID tests, among other things. And so for me, that was really instructive, that this is a generation that's looking for that connection and wanting to grow and develop. And I hope realizing that you're going to grow and develop much more quickly by being in the office, by creating those connections, and by finding those people who mentor and sponsor you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there's a recent slew of studies that have shown that early careers, interns, and fresh outs really do need that in-person interaction to be successful in their roles, because they need the connections, they need to establish those mentoring relationships, which is so much harder to do online. They need to be able to have those kinds of apprenticeship kinds of experiences that are much harder to replicate virtually as well. And so I think, as we're figuring it out, and similar, JPL was operational throughout the pandemic, not building COVID tests, but sending Perseverance to Mars. There's still that pull. Like many employees still want to be remote as much as they possibly can. And I get that as a mom with 2 young kids who has an hour-long commute. Like, being able to work from home is really very helpful. Having those in-person interactions, meaningful, not sitting at your desk in front of a computer on WebEx or Teams or Zoom all day, but actually having those in-person meetings when they're, creative problem solving, collaborative kinds of interactions are really critical.
So we have, I remember the day, actually, one of our young professional, we tried different restaurants around Memphis where I am, and I remember him looking at me, and he was like, I'm so glad I work in manufacturing where I can go in every day. I do not like being at home. I hate being there. It's lonely. Like, it was so raw, and this is a male. Like, you might have been like, oh, was that a female? No, like, he was raw and authentic. He was a young professional. Our most thriving, we call them inclusion groups instead of resource group, is our Smith & Nephew, called SNP, Smith & Nephew Young Professional. That is our most thriving, active, social gathering, personal development in the office, outside the office. They come up with yoga. They've bonded with Medtronic, IP, FedEx. They gather and do volunteer work together. You name it, they're coming up with it, and they're creating it, and they're together. Because if you come from out of university, or you're a couple of years in your career and you're new to Memphis is it's not big city life, right? You don't know anyone. You immediately come in and you're embraced by these young professionals, and you have like a new set of friends they give you such a wide array of things that you can do, and they have a really nice agenda schedule. So if you're into yoga, if you're into bowling, if you want to learn some things about professional development, if you're really into the community and community activism, they do a lot there. But again, it's not being at home. It's not being tied. It is connecting with people, and there is that huge sense and need for connecting.
Great. No, thank you both, all of you, for giving some insights into what some of those trends are, especially in terms of, what is the experience of actually being in the STEM workforce. But I wanted to take a step back, given that, as a part of the session, we are thinking about kind of that entire progression from K-12 schooling through higher education or training, whatever that may look like, and into the workforce. So we know that, our needs in terms of a STEM workforce are quite high. STEM is a part of nearly everything. There's some kind of aspect related to that. But we still see that we have a shortage of workers. There's this shortage that is projected, particularly as we have baby boomers who are retiring and leaving the workforce. what do you think are some of the factors that are contributing to this shortage? So you talked about some of them. I heard, things about kind of perceptions about the, what it is like to be in STEM, that it may be cutthroat, that it's difficult, that maybe the careers aren't flexible, but it sounds like a lot of that, is starting to change. But what are some of the other contributing factors, maybe even before individuals get to the workforce, that are kind of contributing to that shortage? And this is for everyone. Yeah, Mary, please go ahead.
Sure. So a few years ago, 12 years ago now, we established the high school internship program. And that was because we had been focusing on the fact that we weren't getting the diversity of STEM workers that we wanted. And what we learned was that 15 is the age where people turn away from STEM topics in school. And they do that for a few reasons. Not because they lose interest, not because they're not good at it anymore, but they start looking ahead and they're looking at the classes and they're thinking like, those people don't look like me. Or they're starting to think about careers and thinking, I don't know what careers I could have, right? It's easy to get to, I could be maybe a software engineer and a doctor, but they don't know the diversity of careers that you could have. So we created our high school STEM internship program to address that need by getting to people super early. And we focus on under-resourced communities within the communities in which we work and live, although it's obviously open to everyone. And what we do is we bring in the high school students who are interested in STEM. They work side by side with our scientists, with our engineers, in our manufacturing facilities. They do real work in the summer. And we've really seen a great impact. 90% of those people who have participated in the program go on to major in STEM in college. So we know that we're having an impact. We're keeping them interested. We've actually hired 30. That doesn't sound like a lot, but remember we started it 12 years ago, and most of them do 2 years in high school, 4 years as an undergrad, and then come back to us. So we have 30 people who were high school interns, and then almost all of them become college interns and then come work for us. So they know us. They've spent 6 summers with us. It's like 3 years of experience by that point. So they start with a really great understanding of the company. But during that time, they've been able to see different jobs, but they've also created a lot of mentoring relationships with the people in the organization. So they have a lot of connections. And so when things are tough, they reach out to those people that they worked with during the summer. We also have about a third of our college internship program are those people who are in our high school internship program. So for us, this is incredibly important. It's part of our commitment to increase the STEM pipeline. We have a goal of creating 100,000 opportunities for young people to experience STEM either through our internship programs, through other kinds of training. By 2030, we're at about 24,000, so we have some work to do, but we have plans. But that's incredibly important to us because we're really focused on how can we create that STEM pipeline. And we would love other companies to join us in this effort. We actually created a blueprint based upon what we learned creating the program on our own, sort of what we wish we'd known when we started out, which we've published. It's at abbott.stem, and the whole idea is to get other companies to do the same because we've just found it to be so valuable to start in the high school and help people through that whole period of high school to college to the workforce.
So we do something very similar to Abbott in our matriculation. So as you go from even elementary, from our elementary school partnerships with our SWE, our Society of Women Engineer organization, to middle schools, and then with our high school partnership. The other thing that I think has been very successful, so for the last 3 years, we have partnered with an organization called Memphis Youth Athletics, and that is an organization that provides summer races and programs for children in underserved communities. Well, not only do we volunteer our time and effort and go to the track meets and support them, but we also bring them onto our campus and we bring out all of our products and technology and all the 3D and all of the cool stuff, and they get really excited seeing all of the neat gadgets that we have there. And then we have a variety of leaders in various different fields come and present to them. So we're going about the school way, but we're also going into various different communities and their programs and trying to insert ourselves and educate those individuals. So if we don't catch you at the school, we're going to catch you somewhere else, and we're going to share and educate and bring you to our facility and let you see this is what, this is what corporate America is about. This is what technology is about. These are the careers that you can have in this space. And I believe wholeheartedly it's all about how you feed into a young person. It's the start you give them. It's that education. The more I can feed into you, the more I can nurture your soul in some way in all the learnings. I really feel that it's going to add to the person that you will become and the various different opportunities that you now see in front of you that maybe at home or in your family unit or situation, those individuals don't exist, but you've seen them. You've seen people who are doing some of this work, and you're like, okay, I might not see it at home, but I've seen it, and it is possible.
Yeah, just to add, I would say they're the things that JPL is currently doing, and then the things that I hope we will one day start doing. But we're one of 20 signatories for the Space Workforce 2030 Pledge, which is led by Aerospace Corporation. It includes SpaceX and Blue Origin and lots of other companies, and it's 3 parts. And one of the commitments that we're making for 2030 is that we will collectively invest $1 billion into K through 12 education programs to help with this pipeline. Now, but the problem is that money is not actually the solution. So that's what we've committed to. What we do with the funds, I think, is really what matters. And so there are these working groups from across these 20 companies that are trying to figure out what we're going to do with these funds. And I was listening to Revisionist History, which is a podcast by Malcolm Gladwell. I geek out on nerdy podcasts. My apologies. But he was sharing this episode about, why do we see these divides in the classroom? And one of the potential correlations that he identified through discussions with researchers was that it really comes down to a teacher taking an interest and seeing something special in a student. And because of implicit bias, when you have teachers who don't look like you, it's much harder for them to see you as special. And so, one thing that I hope we will do is not just invest in students, but invest in teachers and invest in greater diversity in our teachers so that they can be the role models that when we can't be there in the room, they are there with those students every day.
Oh, thank you for that. So you all have talked about how your own organizations are trying to resolve some of the barriers that contribute to the shortage that we see and the current demographic makeup in terms of our STEM workforce. And one of the things that I think about in my role at Caltech is first, why is diversity important? What role can we play as a university in terms of building diversity? But also thinking about diversity more broadly. So we know that the kind of barriers to diversity, they vary based on which group we're talking about. We have students, we go out and we try to recruit students from rural areas, and who may go to a very small high school in Mississippi or, the Appalachia, and don't necessarily have the same kind of opportunities built into kind of their curriculum or, access to research opportunities or things of that nature. So, I think that identifying the ways that your corporations, institutions can help to fill in some of those gaps that exist in kind of our opportunity structure in this country are really important. Neela, I wanted to ask you specifically, so JPL has been really vocal about its commitment to bolstering diversity within the space industry. Can you talk a little bit more why, in your particular context at NASA JPL, practically, why is this important, both in terms of the space industry specifically and STEM more broadly, and how should we be thinking about diversity in STEM?
Yeah, so at JPL, we see it as critically important. Lori Leshin, who is our first female JPL director, she's like the CEO, has identified 3 new values of the 5 or 7 that were before. Inclusion is the only one that carried over. It's now trusted, inclusive, and bold. And we believe that DEIA, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, are really core to what we do, because we are trying to do impossible things that have never been done before. And so we absolutely need the best problem-solving teams. And the only way to get a diversity of thought and perspective is to have actual diversity. And the only way to make those diverse teams effective and productive is to have inclusion. And so we see that as incredibly core to everything that we're doing. And I'll take an example of specifically psychological safety, which is an area of focus for us. Because without psychological safety, problems get missed, they don't get reported. Missions can fail if a team does not have psychological safety, and NASA is an incredible example, an unfortunate example, a heartbreaking example of what happens when you don't have psychological safety in teams. And so, but in order to educate and empower our managers and leaders to exhibit psychological safety, they first have to understand the perspectives of the different people on their team. And so, again, it becomes about teaching those inclusive behaviors so that they can create psychologically safe teams. I'm rambling, I'm sorry. Did I get to the point? I think I got to the point.
Yes, you did. No, you did. Yeah, that concept of psychological safety is really important. Another thing that's really important in terms of building that SIM pipeline is access to mentors. And Natasha, I know that Smith & Nephew, you talked a little bit about some of your activities, but can you talk about where mentoring exists in the efforts that your corporation is involved in, and why mentoring is so important?
So I have many. I feel like many. I call them my board. I have my board of directors. So mentors, sponsors, people I can just bounce things off of, people who call me out when I'm crazy. Like, I want it all. Like, give it to me and help me be better. And so we have both a regular mentorship process as well as reverse. So our young professional, they have a reverse, and actually uniquely, a unique aspect is our Unity, which is our race and ethnicity inclusion group, is actually looking at a reverse mentorship program in diverse races. So instead of the generational mix, this is, and we learned that from another group in the UK, and we're like, wow, that is fascinating. We should pilot that and see how that works. So we're always looking to be creative and innovative with our mentorship. The key for me, and I get this question all the time about the program, creating a mentorship program, wanting to have one. I'm a huge believer of it, but I'm not a believer in forced mentorship. So we are putting a pilot together with our robotics group in Pittsburgh. It's a smaller group that is there. There's about 300 people on that campus, and we're actually working through creating a mentorship program just for that robotics group in Pittsburgh. And we're using it as our pilot to create a more global, we're not as large as Abbott, we're about 19,000, so to create a more global program. But part of it is really going and asking the question. So we want you to tell us, give us 3 names of someone. It doesn't have to be a people leader. Maybe it's another peer. Maybe it's someone you just saw down the hall or you heard them speak and you're like, oh, that person's awesome. I'd like to learn a little bit from them. right? So you select, and a little bit like Match.com, but is that dated? I don't know, does anybody use Match.com? But it's a little bit of that sort of matching situation instead of it being forced. And then there's sort of that evaluation of you select, and then we pair you, and then we do it for a 6-month interval. We do know that at times people are paired and it doesn't work. And we really believe, so our creed is I, D, and E. We start with inclusion, and inclusion, diversity, and equity equals belonging. And I really feel I need to add W to the end of that. I'm just going to keep going with my acronyms if you let me. But well-being, because I remember once in my career a forced mentorship, and it was torture. Every time I had a meeting with this individual, I would have my 5-page deck, and I would be sweating, and oh my God, what am I going to talk about, and is it relevant? Like, nobody should be tortured in their mentorship meeting. Like, it should be comfort, it should be ease, it should be someone who's guiding and shaping and helping you. You shouldn't sweat 2 days before the meeting that you're meeting with your mentor. So if you're having those moments, like, I need you to call me. I need you to feel safe that you can call me that this is not working. So that's something we've really put into our Pittsburgh pilot, in that do not sit by idly if this, for whatever reason, partnership, right? Yes, you selected Jamie, but you don't really know her, right? Like, you saw her or heard her speak or a couple of times, and you're like, man, she's awesome. I'd like her to be my mentor, but it doesn't click. There's something about when you really do click that lends itself to long-term mentorship. Even when people leave companies, I still have mentors from previous companies, or that turns into sponsorship. Those are those conversations that when you're not around, right? And that's what you want. And it cannot be strained if so I don't want strained mentorship, and I was really quite adamant with our robotics team on leaving that psychological safety and that space open for at any point you do not feel that is working, we can redirect. It is okay, and making sure everyone who participates know that, so that, again, you can thrive and it can be a worthwhile experience for you and not something that you're having anxiety about every time you have to have a meeting. I was there. I remember what that felt like, and I would never want anybody to go through what I went through.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I wanted to mention was the importance of mentorship, not, before you even begin your career. One of the things that really helped me on my journey is just having someone who I could trust, that were not my parents, who I could talk to about, what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about maybe going this route or majoring in this field. And one of the other things that I found that was really important is not just having one mentor, but having things that are called mentors of the moment. You can have mentors for the moment where they may help you with one particular thing, whether that be, you are thinking about where you should do a summer internship, what companies might have the kind of, be able to offer the kind of experiences that would really help you kind of figure out your career path. And I know that sometimes, companies themselves are thinking about this and putting structures in place to provide access to kind of mentoring professionally, so that people can develop that sense of belonging and that sense of well-being. Mary, I wanted to ask you, so Abbott has an interesting workplace benefit that helps employees pay their student loans and save for retirement. What kind of role has this program played in recruiting and retaining STEM workers?
So it's been really instrumental because STEM workers tend to graduate with a lot of student debt. And what we heard from our employees, this was all the way back in 2016, we were talking with our employees about our benefits. And one of the things we heard is we have a very generous match in our 401k plan, but a lot of people felt they couldn't take advantage of it because they had to pay down their student loans. And so we created two paths to getting that employer contribution. One, the traditional path, you contribute to the 401k, the company provides a match. And the second is you contribute that amount to your student loan as if it were going into the 401k, and the employer contribution then goes into your 401k because you're basically saving for yourself by paying down your student.
That's
your
awesome.
student
Oh
debt.
my God.
And
That's brilliant.
So we came up with this idea in 2016. It had never been done before. So we wanted to make sure that it was all legit because we're giving tax-free money to our employees. So we went to the IRS. We got a private letter ruling, and it's been tremendous. We've had many employees taking advantage of it. I know it's been the critical factor in people choosing to join the company. And we have lots of stories of people who've been able to pay off their debt so much more quickly. They just make it their mission, like, I'm just going to make this happen. There's someone in our diagnostics business in R&D who has a PhD, and he was making the point that, you know, as a PhD, you're starting later in life, so you need to be saving, but he's also got to be paying down his debt. So he was able to pay down his debt while we were saving for him in the retirement plan. So it has been tremendous for us. We're super proud that we were the first to implement it. It's actually part of a governmental legislation now called Secure 2.0. So starting in 2024, other employers will be able to do it a lot more simply than we can because it got included in that legislation. But it has been huge for our employees. We've had nearly 2,000 people take advantage of it, and about $3.5 million worth of matching money going into our 401k plan already, with a goal for us to have at least $10 million by 2030, and I think we'll far surpass that.
I think that should be like universal. I don't know why. I mean, can we please get everybody to do that? I mean, that is amazing. So kudos to you. Just got like 200 applications right there just from, I heard my student loan could go away. I mean, Paul, write that down because we're going back and we're selling that one.
No, that really does kind of contribute to, Natasha, what you were talking about not just surviving, but thriving. Being able to know that the company that you work for is supporting your thriving and not just surviving and investing in you.
One of our values is caring, and that's what we hear from our employees, is this is really our caring value in action, that we care enough that we've created a program to address the need that they identified to us.
I thought I went from like 5 EAP to 10 was like glorious, but I'm going back now. I've got to get my act together because no, I mean, seriously, that is so amazing because there's so much that it lends itself to. Less stress on you, more just a sense of just a relief. I can go and live my life a little bit better with having, less of that to worry about. I literally just finished paying off my student loans last December. Hallelujah. And I mean, I put myself on this progressive plan, but think about that, right? If that could have been cut in a 10-year instead of, gosh, now I'm going to age myself, in X years, I would have appreciated that. Like, that would have been a huge, and that also says, and we live on care, collaboration, and courage, right? So Life Unlimited, Care Collab. You care about me, because that adds to my well-being. It adds to my ability to really succeed and do more in my life because I have one less thing that is a burden. Not that it should, but it's one less thing. I love it. Oh, Mary, I just fell in love with you right here.
No, that really is great. And continuing on this theme of retention, I know, just based on the research that some that I've been involved in, some that, my colleagues have done, we know that for individuals, particularly from, communities that have been historically excluded or minoritized or marginalized, the ability to do something in your career that, yes, sparks your interest, but also involves creating change or giving back can make a big difference in terms of retention. So, Neela, I wanted to ask, I know that you're passionate about helping people and organizations create social impact. So what is the connection from your perspective between people's desire to create change and make a difference and retention in the STEM workforce?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was really struck by when I first joined JPL, which was 2 years ago, was just how engaged our employee resource groups were in driving change. And so, in fact, the role that I have now was created as one of 10 actions that the employee resource groups asked for of lab leadership after the murder of George Floyd to create change for the lab. And what I have found is that when you engage employees in the solution and create a shared vision of what the future can be, they see themselves in the work. They see themselves in the organization in such a more profound way than if you say, "Oh, that's a great idea. We'll file it away and we'll look at it later." But rather, co-creating both from the bottom up and top down. And so that's been the heart of my strategy for my work, both in the creation of the Office of Inclusion, our strategy for diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, has really been this approach of bottom-up grassroots, as well as connections for understanding what our limitations are, what our constraints, and what's possible from a top-down approach. And we're capitalizing on that even more so now. So the other thing, in addition to our employee resource groups, of which we now have 10, which is quite a large number for how large JPL is we also have these DEIA action committees. So JPL is structured in a matrix way, so everybody has their own section or group level. And so these DEIA action committees started popping up on their own, totally grassroots driven, where people were wanting to create change within their own organization, but didn't really know how to get started, really know what they could do, what was in bounds, what was out of bounds. And so I took what had existed as the Inclusion Advisory Committee, which was a group that was self-selected. People were nominated and there were votes, and it was a very exclusive process, and turned that group into a community of practice for these DEIA action committees. And so we meet quarterly, people share what they're working on, we do research presentations, we talk about the progress that we're making as a lab, but we're also making connections across these groups, because JPL can be very siloed. So that they're not individually working on things that they on their own, but we're rather collaborating, and we're building a body of best practices for the lab. So,
Great.
So, for those, much is given, right? Much is expected. I could really just stop there, but it's really, and personally, I give a lot of my time, resource, dedication to the community. And I lend that in this role of the importance. And I don't have to do it very hard, because there are people that are in our inclusion groups. We have also what we call life councils that are very dedicated to the community. Very similar to JP, bring ideas to us, bring sensitive topics. We had a lady that was very passionate about domestic violence, and it's a very sensitive topic, and wanted us to have a webinar about it, wanted us to give money to a charity, and planned a whole thing around it, campaign, and we had a speaker, and it was incredibly powerful. I also believe in moving and touching at least one. If one person shift and change your perspective, then I'm checking that win box and I'm going on the next one. But if we're care, collaboration, and courage, it's not just for our employees, our customers, our patients, but also our community. And if you don't show that level of involvement in your own community, that you care, that you want to give back, and we're very fortunate to have from various generations, various different, people who are extremely passionate globally about their community and lend a lot of their time, resources, efforts to ensuring that we touch the community.
So I had another question for all of you. So we've talked about, how your organizations support the cultivation of STEM interest in young people and how you kind of continue to support that interest throughout school, throughout higher education, and then in terms of attracting people to come and join your community and your organization through work. The next critical piece of that is development. So once they're there, kind of what are you all doing to develop them, not just in terms of kind of what they're doing substantively with regard to science, technology, engineering, medicine, whatever the case may be, but more broadly, how they can also become kind of inclusive leaders within the STEM workforce. So can you all talk a little bit about how you are thinking about developing kind of your innovators, what your approaches are to that?
Sure, I'll start. So, nothing that we do can be done without employees, right? It's very obvious. And we look at our employees and we say that we want to create an environment where those employees have an opportunity to grow and develop in their careers. They have an opportunity to build financial security for themselves and for their families. And they also have an opportunity to be part of our mission, which is helping people live healthier, fuller lives through our life-changing technologies. And so everything that we do in our world and within my space is focused around those three pillars. And from a development perspective, I've talked a lot about our interns. When our interns come into the organization, they generally come into our professional development programs. Those are rotational programs. They're either 2 or 3 years long, and they have the opportunity to live and work in different geographies, including outside the U.S. for at least one of those rotations. They get to know the entirety of our company, and that helps them determine where they want to land. So at the end of this professional development program, at the end of their rotation, then they will go and become a full-time employee. But they've had a chance to really see and grow and learn and learn how our leaders interact all around the world. When we talk about inclusive leadership, we have a program for all of our new people leaders called Leading with Impact. We started it in 2021, had all of our leaders globally go through the program, and it really created a shared language about how we lead and about how we interact with one another. One simple thing is it talks about being in the box, and when you're in the box, you're stressed. And I've had very senior people come into my office who would never come in and say, I'm feeling really stressed today, but they'll come in and be like, before we start, I am totally in the box, and I need to talk for a minute. And we have great conversations, but never would they have said, I'm stressed. It's really created a shared conversation for us all, a shared language, which helps with all kinds of management. But it also really set an expectation about what kind of leader do we want you to be, and there was a focus on inclusion, being an inclusive leader, and understanding how you're coming across to those that you're interacting with, as well as really listening to others, which we felt from a lot of our research was one of the places where we had an opportunity to grow and develop. And so we've been surveying every year, seeing improvements there. But those are probably the two that I would say most of all is, from a professional development is a lot about learning about the company, which helps you to understand how we operate, and then our Leading with Impact program.
So development is probably the second highest reason maybe people leave. It's the most asked for aspect, no matter if you're from entry level even to our mid career level. I always say everybody wants some aspects of feeling like they're growing and developing. And so we have quite a few different programs. One of our most coveted is actually a program, the longest, called Elevate, that we have for our kind of entry to mid-level women. And it's a program that really touches on a variety of topics, right? So resiliency, honing your leadership style, how to dealing with conflict, just all the things that go on with your career, how to balance, creating that balance. So it's a wide array of topic and one of the most meaningful. But it all needs to add up, right? So if I'm giving you a course, but then your manager's not giving you that extra piece of it, if they're not including you in meetings, if you're not, you're getting the information 2 days before it's due when you should have been told 2 weeks before, so you would be more prepared. You're not being included in the conversations. I can train you and I can give you like my 50 leadership programs, but it's the people leader. It's about that, like that's where the money needs to be. And what we've started with, and we do have an entry level, is how do we get you when you're a new people leader? Because changing a more senior leader's way of being is a lot more difficult than me helping you when you're a first-time people leader in shaping and molding you into the best I possibly can. So shifting, and we have a variety of leadership development. One of the things we're also very keen on is also the men-women dynamics, where we have our women that say, according to, we use Gallup, some of our surveys, that they're not being developed as much or included as much, and what is missing there? And these are middle level. I'm talking about director. These are middle level. So what do we need to do more? What are we missing? How do we capture those leaders and get them to reshift and reevaluate what does leader development, what is it at different levels, right? When you first come in, there's the programs, there's the learning, there's what you need. Okay, by the time you're in maybe your second or third job, maybe there's some skill sets that you need. There's just a way to navigate corporate America, truly understanding what that person needs and being in tune with that. The other one that we recognize, even with some of our more senior leaders, is coaching. And the importance of when you move from maybe a middle level to more of a senior level, we have received feedback that you feel like you're just thrown out there and no one is there to help coach you, guide you, because you're supposed to just know it. So for me, it's a variety of, you need to understand the need at a variety of at different levels, and then capture it and create programs at those levels.
So for us, we recently have announced JPL's new strategic plan, which is more strategic imperatives. It's a 3-year plan. It's short-term. Much of it is tactical. There are 6 strategic imperatives. One of them is focused on workplace culture, and within that, one of the tasks that we've identified is figuring out how do we hold leaders accountable for practicing inclusive leadership. So we're calling it valuing inclusion. So ensuring that inclusion is a core and critical component of the selection, assessment, and promotion of leaders. So we have lots of different modes of educating our leaders, but even just how we define leaders at JPL is changing. So JPL is a matrix organization. The care and feeding happens in the line. Those are where the managers are. They're defined as people who have direct reports, but we have lots of leaders who lead giant hundreds people teams who don't actually ever sign a time card, and so they're not required to take all of these leadership trainings that the managers have classically had, and yet the culture, the lived experiences of the day-to-day employee is in the flight project, by those leaders who are only held accountable on whether their flight project is being delivered on schedule and on time, not how they're treating their employees. And so as a result, we have people who are literally leaving bodies in their wake, not really literally, but pretty literally. And so, we have to change that culture. And so that, the mechanism that we're doing that is saying, no, we're going to actually hold you accountable to it. We're going to teach you how to be an inclusive leader, but we're also then going to hold you accountable to doing it.
Great. Well, I'm going to have this last question just be a lightning round so we can give the audience an opportunity if anyone has a question to ask. So just really quickly, I want you to go down the line, starting with you, Neela. Sorry to put you on the spot. But in 10 years, what do you project the greatest needs in STEM? What do you think those will be? And what will the STEM workforce look like?
I still think that we as a society need to figure out how do we unburden the caregiving responsibilities so that we're supporting families in a much more holistic way. And no one company is ever going to solve that in of themselves. We can solve pieces, but unless we take a radical look at how we support caregivers, not just parents, but also the people who are caring for the elderly or other kinds of caregiving responsibilities, we're never going to address some of the most entrenched issues of equity that our society is facing.
So I totally agree with you. I'll say a little differently. First, if you believe all the hype, AI will solve all of our problems, and we won't really need as many STEM workers as we say we will. But I don't believe that hype. I actually think in 10 years we will be dealing with the impact that COVID had on that cohort of kids who were graduating from college. In 10 years, they probably were in middle school during COVID. And I just think the school experience for everyone who was in school during COVID is going to be so impactful for the rest of their school career. There are kids who are going to really struggle to catch up. There are kids who are going to struggle with how to have interpersonal relationships because they missed out on those formative years. And I think we as employers are going to have to figure out how to help them so that everyone gets back to kind of the same level. We're already working on that. We're working with the National Association of Colleges and Employers to just talk about what others are seeing. And we've created some programs within our own internship as well around professionalism because our interns were asking for it. But I think we'll still be dealing with that in a decade.
I call the next decade the unapologetic decade. I'm going to be unapologetically black. I'm going to be unapologetically woman. I'm going to be unapologetically neurodiverse. And I'm going to need for employers to embrace that. I'm going to need for employers to understand, grasp it, embrace it, be okay with it. If I need to work from home because I feel there's too much microaggression if I go in, I'm going to need you to embrace that. I'm going to need you to be with it and help me get there. That's one piece. The other one is I'm really looking forward to the cool, like, watch where you're like, you can, everything out, gravitates up and you see. No, but we will need more. I really am looking forward to that. But we will need more, I would say, STEM more than ever. So if you look at everything AI, I use the 8-track to now 2 seconds you can have a song downloaded, right? It went from that to that in I don't know, 25, 30 years. So what is that going to mean? That just means everything is going to be faster, quicker, simpler, at your fingertips. So we will need even more STEM individuals. So AI, they don't run itself. There's somebody back there like programming it and making it savvy and making it cool, like the phone, that ISO 82. There's somebody that's making that happen. It's not just happening miraculously on its own, right? So there will be a need, but we're going to have to embrace people for who they are so they can do the things we need done to get us where we want to go.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question? Yes, please. Yes, if you can come to the microphone, that would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Ortega. I'm a SMDP scholar and a recent master's graduate from UC Berkeley. And so at the peak of the pandemic, college students like myself were forced to attend classes virtually and missed out on a ton of educational opportunities. And as we're recovering from the pandemic, we're starting to see these educational gaps in learning. I've worked as a tutor. I've worked with students that are struggling to catch up, and some are below reading and writing, like below grade level in their reading and writing. And so I was wondering, what are some ways companies are reaching out and trying to bridge this gap in education? I know, Mary, you mentioned Abbott's high school internship program, and Neela, I know you mentioned JPL's $1 billion K through 12 funding promise.
We're not spending $1 billion.
Oh, okay. But I'm curious to learn more about resolving this issue.
So I totally agree with you. It is a big area of passion and interest and focus for me. Where we're starting is with our interns, as I mentioned. I actually asked our interns this summer, would this sort of a professionalism class be of interest? I was surprised that they were so emphatically yes. Even things like, I need help writing emails, I'm just not sure how to do it. So what we will do is continue to focus on what we can do to help our people, right? We listen and we create our programs based upon what those needs are that we identify. And I think we'll continue to see more of those and more gaps, and we'll have to be open and ready for people who have more gaps than what we've seen before. And I think it will be quite uneven as well. And so that's something that we are thinking about even for next summer's interns, is how do we make sure that we can bring everyone to the same level. But it will be decades of work. I really believe that.
Great, thank you. So unfortunately, we are out of time. I love you guys. Awesome audience. One more?
All right.
Okay, yes, let's take one more.
I'll be quick. So I just wanted to go back to the high school programs, because I grew up in New York City, where there are 1,000,001 program opportunities. But something that I saw happening a lot was I had a lot of friends that came from family of immigrants, where they had to go get a job, and it was expected for them to support their family. And while many of the programs were providing stipends, it was never up to par to what they would receive, let's say, working at a grocery store. So as this being another barrier, do you guys see any way to overcome it, or have any actions that your organizations can take to overcome that?
Yeah, we increased our stipends for our internship programs specifically for that reason. We had many students who we were actively recruiting from minority-serving institutions and HBCUs who were not only dealing with that issue, but then also once they got to California, they couldn't afford the rent because it's astronomical here. And so that need bubbled up through the ERGs, came to me, and we advocated to increase the stipend limits. So absolutely, that's something that companies need to be recognizing.
One of the things we try to do is actually get to the parents. So as an immigrant myself and immigrant parents, they didn't have time to come to and listen and understand how important this was, right? So instead of me going to work, this is more important, right? You have to get to the parents and really convince them. And that sometimes is really hard, right? I know, I lived it, so I'm very aware of it. And so we really try. We have a program we do at Rutgers Camden that was created by the Camden leader, the president of that site. And he's a born and raised in Memphis, and brought it back to, and we have these sessions with parents, high schoolers, and we talk through, and I'm talking about the underserved communities, and he has actually offered full ride scholarships to Rutgers Camden. And there were 8 that were given this year. So the program kicked off last year, and they just gave 8 this year. But again, getting to the community, inviting the parents in, really showing the mom and dad. Again, I'm Jamaican, right? So trying to even get them to take some time off, because they're workaholics. You know, we have 10 jobs. We're Jamaicans. So trying to get them to leave a job and come by and so they really understand it. And we have found that if we can get to the parents, it really helped them understand the importance of why your high schooler should do X, Y, Z to help them be better college student. That we found that's made a difference.
Thank you.
Great, so now we are out of time for real, I think. Is that correct? Yes? I think so. Yeah, okay. Well, please join me again in thanking our panelists, and thank you all for coming.